Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine War Update news segment for the 10th of March 2023. So much news to go through. I better rattle through this. Right, we'll go to our usual opening gambit. All the caveats apply. Propaganda, inaccuracy. Russia don't produce the same kind of summary statistics. I find these useful and indicative, and I think they are certainly more recently far more accurate than some critics give them credit for being. 870 liquidated personnel is a big number, and that's an uptick again for the troops lost. 7 tanks, 6 APCs. That's thereabouts. 7 tanks is a pretty useful number. 10 artillery systems and 3 MLRS, I think, is good for the Ukrainians. Artillery are the piece of equipment that cause the most deaths to the opposition. This has been very much an artillery war, and most troops appear to die as a result of artillery. 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems. That is, if they are not just autocannons, if that's something like an S-300, and we'll go on to this, those are really high-value targets. And if Ukraine want to win this war, or Russia, they need to take out the air defense systems of the opposition, because the suppression of enemy air defense didn't happen at the beginning of the war when the Russians started, not to at least the degree they needed, and that means that the airspace has been contested for both sides, and that is very difficult for the aircraft to be as effective as possible. One aircraft, don't know whether that is the one from yesterday, but the one announced yesterday that I told you about was actually from March the 6th, I think. And they'd only reported it yesterday, so I don't know, or that could be a new one. 9 drones, 34 cruise missiles, of course, saturation missile attack last night, or not last night, night before. 6 vehicles and fuel tanks, and 3 pieces of special equipment. They could be radar systems, all sorts of stuff. So I think that's a fairly bad night fairly bad day for the Russians. Good figures for the Ukrainians. Troops lost, artillery systems, and MLRS. 3 MLRS is not a good number for the Russians. 1 aircraft and 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems are useful numbers. Okay, let's go and put some meat on the bones. Ukraine's military says it hit 13 Russian temporary bases over the past day, so that could explain the uptick in troops. Ukrainian troops also hit a Russian control post, 2 logistics centers, 3 ammunition warehouses, and an electronic warfare system. So that's going to be your special piece of equipment that we might have just seen, and anti-aircraft missile complex, said the general staff. Of course, Ukrainians will have lost a whole bunch of equipment as well. Yes, so it's not like this is a one-way street. So these are Ukrainian releases, but Russians will have similar claims. Ukraine has announced it has downed a Su-25 plane near Bakhmut on the night from Sunday to Monday with the help of the Polish Piron manpad. This is one I've talked about previously. However, the point of note here is that Pirons are particularly good at night and have unique thermal images. Poland donated a bunch of these before the war. This just gives the Ukrainians an extra sort of capability that perhaps the Russians don't have. They've got a really interesting suite of manpads. See, these portable air defense systems, short range, but you know, pretty useful, as you can see, taking down a very expensive plane. Okay, let's see if we can justify some of those figures. Well, here we've got some video evidence of an S-300 system and a Tor M2 air defense system taken out by loitering drones. And why this is important to show is that loitering munitions have been, I think Russia have had the advantage in loitering munitions. Their Lancets have caused around about 100 plus pieces of equipment to be taken out. At least there's visual confirmation of that, probably more for the Ukrainians. But now the Ukrainians are starting to use a lot of their own. So this is a Tor M2, a lot of their own loitering munitions. Some of these are created themselves, a bit sort of put together themselves, and others are designed to be loitering munitions that they've been given. Here's your S-300. This is an expensive piece of kit, a decent piece of air defense. This is incredibly useful for the Ukrainians here, this kind of hit. So that's that being taken out. Now, I don't know how bad the damage is to either of these pieces of equipment, whether these are irreparable or whether that has done too much damage. I don't know. Okay, there have been explosions in Ilovaisk. Ilovaisk is a rail hub and a logistics hub just behind. Let's find it here for you. It's about there, just behind Donetsk. and that is consistently hit Ilovaisk. It's a scene of a bit of a massacre in its sort of 2014 onwards war before this 2022 iteration of the war. There was a whole bunch of Ukrainian mechanized equipment was taken out in Ilovaisk. So that, yeah. Anyway, that's there's been stuff happening there. Last night, Russia launched 95 missiles in the latest attack, rather than the 81 previously thought. So I would like to see the makeup of what they think of the number of missiles now. I reported 81 because that was a number that was summarized yesterday. But actually, more than that, still far less than the at the peak, and of course, the longest time between missile attacks since October. So again, what was that? What does that tell us? The type of missiles used, it looks like they're running out at least of certain types of missiles. Electricity supplied to Kyiv, and this was yesterday, bear in mind, so things will be better now. Electricity supplied to Kyiv consumers has been fully restored. Work on restoration of heat supply continues. Currently, 30% of homes are without heating in Kyiv. Utility workers plan to fully restore heat within a day. This is reported by Mayor Klitschko. In other words, the resilience of the energy infrastructure is greater than certainly Russia would hope for. They're able to bounce back after these huge missile attacks quite quickly, and it's a testament to the work that these guys do. According to the information of the Kherson military administration, over the past day, the Russians shelled the territory of Kherson 86 times, firing more than 430 shells. The Russian army struck the residential quarters of Kherson 7 times, and actually, you can see like this is a bus stop taken out. And again, this is a civilian residential. This is a city residential area, absolutely terrible, and that is a war crime. There you go. Just it's despicable what they're continuing to do to Kherson. Last night, Russians attacked Zaporizhia as a result of the attack. So I think this is with S-300s. They've been hitting Zaporizhia quite a lot. They hit it quite a lot regularly, have done over the course of the war. And it seems to get quite a few S-300s. There must be some S-300s stationed fairly close to that because Zaporizhia is the one that gets hit by the S-300s, occasionally Kharkiv as well. As a result of the attack, there was no electricity, heating, or water in several areas of the city. So, yeah. Moving on to, well, if I can get my mouse to work properly, or my fingers. Military importance of holding Bakhmut is only increasing. According to Colonel General Alexander Syrsky, some people are quite critical of him, commander of Ukraine's ground forces, holding Bakhmut allows Kyiv to prepare its reserves for future counteroffensives and exhaust the resources of the Russian army. Exactly what I've been talking about for the last couple of weeks with what Bakhmut is. At least that's the line that they are publicly saying. That makes the most sense to me, is that they are fixing Russian troops there, attriting them down in a ratio that is beneficial to Ukraine, holding them so they can't attack elsewhere, and that allows the Ukrainians to prepare for their coming counteroffensives. The occupiers have exhausted all the stocks of shells stored in the central regions of the Russian Federation. Deliveries are now being made from more distant warehouses, which complicates logistics, reports the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Quote, more and more ammunition is in an unusable condition, often covered with rust. The number of such shells can reach 50%. And I've shown you footage of this to confirm this. At least, that may be anecdotal, but it's piecing these pieces of jigsaw together to give you an accurate picture, one hopes, of the state of affairs in the Russian armed forces. The General Staff predicts serious interruptions in the supply of shells to the occupying forces in the coming months. I would absolutely predict that to be the case. It's also a problem for the Ukrainians. The thing is, the Ukrainians do have the large number of manufacturers working to supply them with ammunition around the world from their allies. So this is a very interesting question to ponder, says Trent Dolenko, pointed to Ocean East, saying large-scale missile strikes on energy infrastructure this late in winter appear counterintuitive. The question is, does the current salvo provide indication for how long it takes for Russia to replenish AELCM, so cruise missiles, and SRBMs, ballistic missiles, in meaningful capacity to perform theatre-wide strikes? Yes. I mean, this is So UA intelligence said today that yesterday's strike probably used a monthly production of missiles, but Russia has been observed to increase ballistic missiles the past time, not expecting for time between strikes to lengthen, rather shorten. So the ballistic missiles, there is a greater supply of those because they've got 8,000 odd S300s in stock. They don't have a shortage of S300s, which is why you are seeing in each successive missile salvo a greater number of ballistic missiles. These things, however, the S300s particularly in their surface to surface, ground to ground attack mode, are not very accurate, which is why you're getting residential areas hit. It's just the wrong missile to be using those um, for those attacks. However, they're using them because A, they've got a lot of them, and B, air defense struggled to take out ballistic missiles. They go up into the stratosphere, some of them, and they're incredibly fast and come down at very acute angles. So it's very difficult for them to be taken out. And of course, they've started using the Kinjal missiles as well, very potent missiles. In greater numbers, we'll see in the next. It'll be really interesting to see what missiles they use in the next missile strike. Okay, the Wagner boss, you get Yevgeny Prigozhin, is complaining about the Russian MOD ghosting him. It's not picking up. Hey, you're not picking up my phone calls. Come on, sweetheart. It's not picking up his phone calls, and his representatives passes have been deactivated to stop him nagging them for ammunition. This has been going on for a little bit of time, and Prigozhin has been very publicly airing his discontent over this. In response to a question from the Russian news outlet about whether Wagner's ammunition shortages have been resolved, he has posted an audio reply to his Telegram channel. The translation is, no, it didn't get any better with ammunition. Basically, nothing's changed at all, but there are indeed changes. A bit weird. In order for me to stop asking for ammunition, all special telephones were turned off for me in all offices, in all departments, etc. Another important thing they have done is blocked all passes to all the agencies that have to make decisions. I will not name them so as not to discredit them in any way. So now I can only ask through the media. In fact, that's probably what I'll be doing, but it's not all bad. There are positive aspects, of course. Kudos to the industrialists, Denis Valentinovich Manturov and Igor Nosenko, and all those who work with them and rivet these shells. Profuse thanks very much from everyone. So obviously the industrial manufacturers of shells are working overtime to get these things made, but he's not getting them. They're going to the Russian regular army. There's this big spat between the two, and he's now airing his grievances in public as without being overly critical of the exact people and departments. He's navigating a very fine line there. General staff in Rubizhny, which is up near Severodonetsk, and yeah, there it is. Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, Severodonetsk, Rubizhny, Kremlin. Up in that area, there is Russians place personnel in residential quarters hiding behind civilians. In fact, this has already been logged as a war crime. I think they've registered this as a war crime in Rubizhny. Military personnel of the Russian army are housed on the first and second floors. Civilians are left to live above. General staff for the past day, the Air Force. Oh no, it goes on to something else. So that's just a one-off. Somewhere else, I've seen that the talk about that as being a war crime. They've logged 2 separate war crimes yesterday, I think, and that was one of them. Okay, on to military aid, humanitarian aid, financial aid, all that kind of stuff. Ukraine has allegedly received one of 2 Patriot anti-aircraft missile systems promised by the US and Germany, but it has not yet put into operation, writes the Financial Times. Ukraine also expects several Patriot launchers from the Netherlands. These are going to be super important if they have any chance of taking down those Kinjal ballistic missiles and things like the S-300s. Poland agrees to a joint transfer of MiG-29 to Ukraine. It's time for us to make a decision, says the Slovak defense minister. Well, as the minister of defense for Slovakia told the correspondent of Suspilna media, the country is ready to transfer 13 fighters to Ukraine, but at first it must be approved by the parliament. About a week ago, the Slovakian defense minister said that Slovakia was ready to transfer 10 MiGs to Ukraine. At the same time, according to open sources, there are 11 MiG-29s in Slovakia, so there may be a misunderstanding or an error in the new number of 13 promised MiG-29, so some issue over the numbers, but despite such minor details, if the procedure of transferring the MiGs from Slovakia and Poland to Ukraine takes place, the Ukrainian Air Force should be replenished with a little more than 40 fighters, around 30 from Poland and around 10 from Slovakia. Huge, huge, huge. And that will be, I mean, they have provided some earlier in the war under the guise of being ones that were disassembled because they were spare parts, except they weren't. They disassembled them, claimed they were spare parts, sent them to Ukraine, and Ukraine put them back together. I believe that's what happened. Don't know which nation that was. Might have been Poland, might have been Slovakia actually. But anyway, this is much more formal, out in the open. Yeah, we're going to give you fully operable MiG-29s. Job done. Poroshenko, former leader, handed over to the AFU. He's now involved quite a lot in fundraising and getting stuff. So he's handed over to the Ukrainian a few advanced drones here. So this looks pretty useful. I don't know exactly what these drones do. They look like reconnaissance drones, unable to sort of carry anything, but maybe they can. I don't know. But that's all really good news. Ukraine need as much as that stuff as they can get. Okay, moving on. Poland has delivered all 14 Leopard 2A4 tanks, and indeed the Portuguese 3 have gone as well, I think, that they promised to provide to Ukraine, said the Polish Defence Minister Mariusz Błaszczak, and that includes those trained personnel on them. I wonder where they are being stored, ready for the counteroffensive. That's obviously going to be very secret. Poland has delivered 10 more Leopard 2A4. Okay, just said that. Additionally, the German army transferred 2 more Gepards. I believe there are more Gepards to come, sourced from various places, but I'll have to look into that. Following Finnish government approval, Estonia will re-export military equipment and supplies to Ukraine. D-30 howitzers. These are pretty old howitzers, but they fire lumps of explosive, pretty okay distances. They're going to be useful. And 122mm ammo, super useful. Further details of military supplies are confidential. Exports fall within the Estonian government's January 2023 €113 million military aid package. Latvia, another Baltic nation, donates drunk drivers' cars to Ukraine's war effort. 7 cars were driven in a snowstorm onto a trailer and out of a state impound lot on Wednesday, destined for Ukraine. Good use of those vehicles. And here is, it looks like this turret is on the back of that vehicle. That's not the case. Bit of a visual one there. I saw this image out of the corner of my eye. I thought they put a tank turret on a truck. However, what is going on here is that this is a truck the Czechs are turning into anti-aircraft platforms. So the Czechs are doing super business actually quite literally business, but super help in putting together all sorts of stuff like upscaling the T-72s so that and they are a bunch of these. They're consistently being made upscaled and put on the front line. So you're already seeing those in Ukraine. T-72s with a bunch of decent kit on board, and these are kind of technicals, I guess. Anti-aircraft systems put on the back of 15 trucks and sent to Ukraine, hopefully in a few weeks' time. First images of the Otto Melara M109L 155mm self-propelled guns. So these are, again, useful bits of kit delivered from Italy to Ukraine appeared today, despite Italian government keeping aid to Ukraine under secrecy. So a bit like France, so they keep a bit stum on that. Reportedly, around 20 to 30 of these were to be delivered to Ukrainian military. That is really good. As I've said before, I think they are in a pretty good position for artillery going forward, given what they've been promised. The challenge is, of course, ammunition. So there's no point having all the artillery you can poke a stick at. I'm not saying they've got that much, but there's no point having enough artillery if you're only, as I've said before, only able to fire 20% of the shells you want to. Bringing in more artillery is going to mean that actually each unit is going to fire even less than 20%. So that's why the EU and allies are scrabbling like big time to get that ammunition production up and the provision to Ukraine sorted. EU ministers today will discuss ways of financing the recovery of Ukraine using Russian assets frozen in Europe, which is an absolutely great idea. It's much more difficult in practice. There are loads of legal obstacles in a way to doing that. Certain countries have said we're definitely going to do that. UK has said they won't do that because the legal ramifications of doing it. So they'll find other ways and work out other things to do with the frozen assets. Um, high-ranking high-ranking officials of the U.S. Defense Department believe Iran is using Ukraine as a testing ground for its weapons. The CNN report comes just a couple of days after Sky News proved the Iranians had given 100 million bullets and 300,000 shells to Russia, but no ballistic missiles yet. And indeed, the Sky article here, the source, I mean, I don't know, it's proved, but there's certainly there are sources suggesting this has happened. Sources claim that 2 Russian-flagged cargo ships departed an Iranian port in January bound for Russia via the Caspian Sea, carrying approximately 100 million bullets and around 300,000 shells. Details are in the article there. I won't go through that now, but the article is Iran's alleged ammunition for Russia's war in Ukraine, the secret journey of the cargo ships accused of supplying invasion. Now, as I keep saying, all of these tabs are basically this is what Ukraine are getting from their allies. They are getting given shed loads of stuff, like really meaningful stuff that are often better pieces of kit than what they're fighting against. Not always, but often. And what are Russia getting? Well, actually, it appears not very much at all. They are unable to be supplied by lots of people who might, or a few people who might otherwise supply them militarily. And so it has to be done in secret. There's all this talk about China, whether they're going to step up aid into military aid. It appears not. So it's just Iran. What they have is Iran getting the stuff, maybe some ammunition from North Korea. But this again, 300,000 sounds a lot, and it is. I mean, that is great for Russia. They're obviously going to use that. They're going to accept that very willingly. But at the rate of using 60,000 a day at their peak, that is, of course, 5 days worth of artillery ammunition. Now, at their present rates, that's probably more like 15 days. It depends. It depends what rate they're using. That's me working out as 20,000. There's some claims that they're using less than that. But anyway, Iran are being a bit of an issue for the Ukrainians in what they're giving to Russia. And there were talk that I saw talk as well that Russia were running low on rifle ammunition. And rifle ammunition, you might think, must be really, really plentiful. Trentelenko was talking about this, saying actually after the Korean War, America ran really short of rifle ammo. It's not unusual, but they are. There was all these claims that they've got all this infinite amount of ammo stockpiled, but actually they didn't. A lot of it was kept really poorly. They've absolutely burned through a whole bunch, and they don't have the stocks certainly anymore that people thought they did, and that includes some of the basics like rifle ammunition. It looks like Turkey is starting, and I don't know the details of this. This is just Michael McKay saying this, but it looks like Turkey is starting to respect sanctions on the Russian terrorist state by blocking shipment of some prohibited goods. The UAE may follow suit. So there have been some countries that have not quite been as towing the Allied line with regard to sanctions. Turkey is one of them. UAE appears to be one of them. If this continues, the only pariah states like India and China will be left trading with the Russian terrorists. I mean, of course, that's pretty harsh language. These aren't really pariah states because in Asia, India and China are your big players, and actually, many Asian nations aren't hugely in support of Ukraine in the way that many Western states are. Okay, very quickly, let's get on to because this has been a long one. Geopolitics, Georgia. Protesters are once again gathering in Rustaveli Avenue and in front of the parliament of Georgia in Tbilisi. It looks like the ruling party's declarations aren't enough for the Georgian people. So there have been continued protests in Georgia. The ruling Georgian Dream Party rescinded one of the laws that they were trying to pass through about foreign agents. And indeed, I believe they have all those who have been detained are going to be released, which is great news. Now, I was watching new NWE War Reports, which is New World Economics. who I'll leave it up to you where you think he sits. He did a video on these Georgian demonstrations yesterday and painted both parties, the Georgian Dream and the opposition, as being pro EU, pro NATO. But that's not quite accurate, and you need to be a little careful here. So, although Georgian Dream, the party ruling, were technically pro EU and on the books are pro EU and want to integrate closer with Europe, actually they've moved away from that, and it's there's a lot of lip service going on. This is a very interesting piece in foreign policy. Georgia's ruling party is tanking its own NATO bid, accusing the US ambassador of blackmail is just the start. This is from August last year, right? So a lot has happened since August, but there's a huge amount of info in here about how I'll probably do this as an extra about how Georgian Dream are not really as pro EU as someone like NWE War Reports might say. In contrast to Georgian Dream's apparent stance on the issue, more than 80% of Georgians still want to join the EU. 70% want to join NATO. So the people are in great favour of that, but it doesn't look like the ruling party is so in favour as as people who have claimed. So experts place the blame for Georgia's hard turn toward Russia with billionaire oligarch Bidzina Ivanishvili, who founded Georgian Dream and continues to exert an outsized influence on it. Quote, his recent pro-Russian Putin-style anti-democratic actions and his governance through an informal network of unaccountable individuals have confirmed that Ivanishvili is the informal ruler of Georgia and a Russian ally. Batu Kutelia, a former Georgian ambassador to the US, said in a message to Foreign Policy. As proof, Kutelia pointed out the fact that Georgia's current ministers, quote, served as his personal aides of some sort and worked in Ivanishvili's Kartu bank. And it goes on to say that, goes on to give lots of evidence of how they are not being as pro democracy as you might think. Here we go. It appears that the backsliding of democracy, failed judiciary reforms, political prosecution, assault on free media and pro-democracy activists, and attacks on freedom of speech were carried out intentionally to prevent Georgia from becoming part of the Western institutions, and it is what Russia wants to see in Georgia, Bazayashvili said. So the dismantling of democracy by Georgian Dream has been especially notable in the judiciary, whose independence is all but obliterated, so on and so forth. Blah, 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 blah. It's not... the government there, Georgian Dream, is not pro EU. Like it might technically be, but there's a lot of lip service going on, and you've got a lot of protests against that government for people who are very much, it appears, pro EU, pro West, pro NATO. Okay, moving to Belarusia. Belarusian President Lukashenko has talking about democratic backsliding, has signed a law which would allow the death penalty for any government or military official that's convicted of high treason. So this is Lukashenko looking more and more, and Belarus looking more and more autocratic. This is dictatorship 101, isn't it? So if you're convicted of doing anything against the government, opposing the government, you can be sentenced to death. So is that going to promote free expression, freedom of speech, the freedom to oppose the government? No, of course not. In Bulgaria, which has broadly been supportive of Ukraine, but there is obviously, as with many of these Eastern European nations, a pro-Russian component inside inside the governments, inside the nations. In Bulgaria, Atanas Stefanov, a Russian-loving politician, threw the Ukrainian flag from the balcony of a city hall in the capital, Sofia. Below the massive crowd, one person cheered and made the typical Kremlin propaganda rubbish about fascism. So, well done him. This is massively important. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban said the country will probably have to reconsider relations with the Russian Federation due to the changing geopolitical reality. And in Bloomberg, we see... so what happened... So he was at an economics uh, symposium, economic forum in Budapest, and said some very important things. So, as Bloomberg says, while it's in Hungary's interest to maintain ties to Russia, especially due to its energy reliance, Europe's relations with Moscow may not be rebuilt following the conclusion of the war, forcing Hungary to also adjust. Orban said at an economic forum in Budapest on Thursday. I understand the need to rebuild Russian-European relations after the war, but that's far from realistic, Orban said. That's why Hungary's foreign and economic policy need to think hard about what sort of relations we can establish and maintain with Russia in the next 10 to 15 years. Wow. So this is Orban being pretty practical here. This is putting the ideology aside and saying, actually, what's the next 10 to 15 years going to look like? Who's going to be looking better? The EU or Russia? Russia's being sanctioned by everyone. It looks like they're going to go through an economic black hole. They're going to really, really struggle, and they're having a massive war that is churning up their budget, so on and so forth. Like, although ideologically Orban says, I imagine in his head, I want to get into bed with Putin here, and we can be, great bedfellows. That's not clearly not going to be in the best interests of Hungary. So we need to think quite carefully about where we're going to position ourselves. And I think there's going to be there seems to be a reluctant changing of tack for Hungary here and Orban, as the realities of his position are probably becoming apparent, as he is being sort of effectively blackmailed by the EU. That has a huge negative connotations. I don't mean it like that. The EU have withheld a lot of funding due to the fact that Hungary are being anti-democratic and are also not doing things in the best interests of the EU. And so they are, in my opinion, rightfully withholding funding in certain areas. And he's thinking, right, okay, either we can continue this with Russia, but actually we're going to bite our nose off to spite our face, or we're going to have to bite the bullet and say, sorry, Poots, me old mate, but we're going to have to change the way we deal with you, because it turns out that we're in Europe and not in the USSR. And I think that is massively significant. And also significant, goodness me, Israel will launch military operation against Iran soon. US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin in Israel, after meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu, said that the United States would now not allow Iran to acquire nuclear weapons, and confirmed that Israel's military operation against Iran would begin in the very near future. Holy crap, right? This is huge. But this also has massive ramifications for Ukraine, Russia, because if Iran are actually going to be involved in a war, then they're going to be less likely to be giving all of their military equipment to Russia. In the same way that Russia's defense industry has got to a precipice and fallen off it, but they can't build the stuff. They can't fulfill orders to the rest of the world that have been ordering Russian military hardware. So Russia can't sell that stuff because they need it themselves in their own war. Iran, if they're going to be at war with Israel, and goodness me, this is huge, they're going to need all their military hardware, so they're going to be unlikely to be selling it off to Russia. And this will in turn, as we saw with Iran supposedly giving 300,000 shells and 1 million rounds of ammunition to Russia, this will in turn help Ukraine. So, but also, World War III, goodness. Right. Anyway, that's enough from me. There's a really big one today. Lots of news. Really sorry. Not sorry. If you like it, you're still listening. If you don't, you would have left a quarter of an hour ago. Thanks so much for your support. Really appreciate it, everyone. I will be doing my frontline update a little bit later. It'll be a bit later than normal today. But keep your eyes peeled for that. Anyway, take care. Toodle pips.